Welcome everybody to another edition of Virginia Wine and Song, the Virginia YouTube channel where we talk about wine and we talk about an underrated piece of music from the classic rock era, which I've defined as 1964 to 1999. However, sometimes I go off on a tangent and talk about something else. It's now the end of March 2026, and I'm going to veer off, and I haven't done a special video on non-wine and non-music since December. So I'm going to go into another topic, which is movies. Of course, I like movies, as you probably have seen in previous videos if you've watched this channel. But I also really love music. So you put those two together, what do you get? You get the musical genre. And I actually was going through my collection of DVDs and Blu-rays, and I was quite surprised to find a lot of musicals. Musical is not a genre I think about very often. I tend to like comedies and dramas and action movies and horror movies more, but musical is definitely a genre that I do like. So I was going through them and I decided, well, let me see if I can put together 15 musicals that I consider to be underrated or not really talked about that much. Now, there are going to be some surprises on this list. I picked 15 because I actually have 15, which surprised me, like I said. There are going to be some surprises on here, some movies that you may not necessarily classify as musicals, but I do, and I will try to explain as I go through this. I'm going to try to go pretty quickly with 15 movies. You know, I don't want to talk too much about each selection. I'll just tell you what the movies are and a few thoughts about it, and we'll go from there. So, okay, we're going to start with number 15 and work our way up to number 1. And number 15 is a classic. I'm going to go ahead and get the classic out of the way right now because this is no way underrated. This is not overlooked. This is definitely considered to be a classic. And looking back at all the classic musicals, and of course you probably can name several of them: The Sound of Music and West Side Story and The Fiddler on the Roof and Mary Poppins and Meet Me in St. Louis and quite a few. I picked, as far as the classic era musicals, I picked Singing in the Rain. Singing in the Rain, I think, is one of the happiest, most joyous movies ever made. It's really got no dark themes compared to like The Sound of Music, which actually has a pretty dark undercurrent in it, and The Fiddler on the Roof is the same situation. This is actually just a pure joyous movie about the transition of silent movies to sound, and the characters break out into song and dance. Of course, we all know Singing in the Rain, the actual dance that Gene Kelly does this in the rain. But there are also some other great moments in there, like Make 'Em Laugh, of course, and Good Morning, Good Morning. It's got a great cast. In addition to Gene Kelly, of course, Donald O'Connor, Debbie Reynolds. Just makes you feel good to watch it. And it's also very funny. The way the actors, the stars of the silent era, were trying to transition over to sound, and what they go through, and how they're shocked to see sound reintroduced into film in Hollywood. And it's very funny, very historic, and it's just got a great soundtrack. If you ever are down in the dumps and you want to pick me up, you can't go wrong with Singing in the Rain. Number 15. Number 14. We're going to go totally on the other side of the spectrum, from light and kid-friendly and happy and fun to a movie that is also, I think, fun. It's kind of happy, depending on if you like your humor dark, but definitely not for kids. I'm talking about the South Park movie. South Park, bigger, longer, and uncut. And it's funny, I never watched the South Park series when it was on Comedy Central. I just never did. I didn't have cable at the time, and it just didn't really interest me. So I went into this not really knowing much about the history of the different characters, and I loved it. I thought it was just such an interesting and intelligent movie about censorship and how Canada is portrayed as this horrible force of evil in the film. You got Saddam Hussein in this movie, of course. You got Satan. You've got all these famous voices and these kids trying to break into this movie that's really not appropriate for them. So it's very timely. It came out in 1999, and it really kind of surprised especially a lot of adults who were thinking that it was a kids movie. But it's also a musical, and it actually was nominated, I think, for Best Song with the song Blame Canada. So it's a musical. It's a comedy. It's a statement about censorship. It's a statement also about American superiority over other countries, and it's done all to music and a lot of humor and a lot of very, very dark, risque, not for kids humor. South Park is great. Number 14. Number 13, New York, New York. This is actually a Martin Scorsese film. He made this in 1977, and it was a failure at the box office. This is the original director's cut, which is about 20 minutes longer than the original version. The original version is actually very long in itself, but they added about 13 minutes for the director's cut. And this is a movie that is actually, I wish I would have seen it on a big screen. Maybe one day they'll bring it back on a big screen for like a short release. Because it really deserves, I think, to be seen on a big screen. I just watched it on TV, on video, DVD, and it's not exactly the happiest film. It's about two very talented people. One is a saxophone player played by Robert De Niro, and this is post-World War II in New York, of course, New York, New York, and a singer played by Liza Minnelli. They're enormously talented people who fall into this relationship together, and it becomes kind of a love-hate relationship. There are a couple of set pieces in this that are really, really elegant and beautifully staged. It does have a tendency to drag a little bit, but the music is great, the performances are good, the set design, period detail is wonderful, and it's actually quite a movie. It's not one of his best movies by far, but it's definitely interesting. And it was released in 1977, a time where musicals were, so unpopular. Nobody had released a musical in several years, and this movie was not a hit, despite the famous director and the talent behind it. Anyway, the song New York, New York, that was made famous by Frank Sinatra, made its debut in this film. And the movie is sung by Liza Minnelli. She's great. She's great in everything. You're going to see her again later in this countdown. So this is number 13, New York, New York. Number 12, for biopics. There are a couple of biopics I could have picked. And a biopic I would put into the musical category, because there's a lot of music in these films, whether it's Bohemian Rhapsody, or Ray, or Walk the Line, or Coal Miner's Daughter, or Sweet Dreams. Sweet Dreams is the biopic about Patsy Cline. You're going to have a lot of music in those films. I picked Rocket Man just because it came on the heels of Bohemian Rhapsody, which I thought was okay. I thought it was good. I didn't think it was great. I preferred Rocket Man a lot more, mainly because Elton John is still alive and he was actually a consultant for the film. He was on the set when they were filming it to make sure it was accurate. Taron Egerton plays Elton John, and he's great. He's an actor I've only seen in previous movies like Kingsman, but he embodies Elton John. He didn't get an Oscar nomination, maybe because, if anything, it could be too show-offy of a performance, but he's Elton John. He's playing Elton John, who's a very show-offy performer. So maybe the Academy was kind of turned off by how showy his performance was, but he was great, and his singing is, I think it is really him singing these songs. They recreate a couple of moments of Elton John's history. It talks about his relationship, his songwriting relationship with Bernie Taupin. I think it's a great movie. They talk about his drug addiction and how he licked drugs and his comeback in the 80s. It's all in this film. Rocket Man is a fun movie. Great music, of course. Great performances. I like it a lot. Rock and Roll High School is the next film. I focused on this movie before on a video I did on underseen or sleeper movies, sleeper hits from the 70s. So I'm going to include this as well, because this is also a musical. It's got the Ramones. So we've gone from Elton John to the Ramones. A nice transition there. And the Ramones are definitely in this. They have a couple of musical numbers. It's about the number one fan of the Ramones, who's played by PJ Soles, who's really great in this film. She plays Riff Randall. She's a high school student, although she was probably in her 20s when she made the film. But she's pretty convincing as a high school student. And she writes a song called Rock and Roll High School to try to attract the Ramones to give a performance at her school, which is later dubbed Rock and Roll High School. It's a crazy movie, and I've seen it a couple of times. I've compared it to Rocky Horror Picture Show. I think the movie they had hopes that this was going to be a big midnight movie like Rocky Horror, and it never was. It was more of a it did okay as a midnight movie, not like Rocky Horror did. And I think it's a lot more fun. It's got Mary Woronov in it. Mary Woronov and Paul Bartel, who were later in Eating Raoul together. They are just great. He's a music professor, really stuffy, and he becomes, really into the Ramones. And he actually dances at the end of the movie. And you got Mary Warnoff, who plays this really stern, Ava Brown type principal. It's a fun movie. You can watch it anytime and just have a good time. The next movie, I gotta move a little faster here. This is Godspell, and I'm not really a huge religious person. I'm not really familiar with the books of the Bible. This is a movie that I remember seeing when I was a kid, and I kind of liked it. I mainly liked it because of the way New York City looked in this film. They filmed in New York City, and I don't know how they did it. It's basically about Jesus and some of his followers or / disciples who go around New York City and they work out parables from the Bible, but they do it in various locations in New York City, like Ward Island and a tugboat going across New York Harbor. And I don't know how they filmed it because there's nobody else in the film. It's just them with all these backdrops of New York City. And it's like, what did they do? Clear the city so they could film Godspell? Of course, it was based on a Broadway show that was popular at the time. Another movie that was very popular around the same time as Jesus Christ Superstar, also a stage play that they made a movie out of. I actually prefer Godspell. Of course, the songs, we all know Day by Day. There's another one on here that's really, really good called By My Side. Beautiful song. There are a couple other songs. I can't think of the other ones. God Save the Children. God Rest the People. I just watched this movie again a couple of weeks ago, and I've already forgotten some of some of the song titles. But you've heard them. You've heard them all. Hear ye the way of the Lord. I pray. Again, I'm not a religious person. I watch this movie mainly because the performances are so infectious. The guy, Victor Garber, plays Jesus. He would later be Jennifer Gardner's father on Alias, and he was the shipbuilder of the Titanic. He's been in a lot of, he was in Argo. He was a Canadian Prime Minister in Argo. And here he is in this movie made in 1973 where he plays Jesus. Kind of a hippie version of Jesus with a Superman outfit on. There's a sequence where they're all dancing on top of the World Trade Center. The World Trade Center is still under construction when they filmed this movie. And you see them on top of their dancing, and that's really bittersweet because when you think about what happened to the World Trade Center, it's the complete opposite of the message that this movie is trying to get across. It's just, Godspell is just, it's a fun movie. And if you know a lot about the Bible, you may enjoy it. Or, depending on your viewpoint of the Bible, you may find this to be satanic, because I've seen some reviews that they call this movie as heresy because they're thinking it makes light of the Bible, and I don't think it does. Anyway, Godspell. Moving a little quicker here. This is Begin Again. This is a semi-sequel to Once. The movie Once was a very low-budget musical drama that was written by John Carney back in the 90s, or back in the 2000s, the early 2000s, which ended up becoming kind of a sleeper hit. Steven Spielberg picked Once as his favorite movie of the year that it came out. This was a second film, which I actually like a little bit more. I was going to put Once on this list, but I figured I could only pick either Once or this movie. This is Begin Again, and this is another movie that I mainly got, maybe because I was born in New York City, and I feel like New York City is kind of in my DNA. Begin Again is definitely a New York City film. It's basically about a struggling lounge singer played by Keira Knightley, who actually doesn't have a very good singing voice, and she's discovered by this record label executive who hasn't been able to sign a famous act for about 15 years. He's like in a dry spell, and he hears her, and they decide to go around New York City and record an album in various settings in New York City. So it's similar to Godspell in that it uses New York City's settings very, very well. It's got a great supporting cast in this. Catherine Keener shows up. She plays Mark Ruffalo's ex-wife, and she's great in any movie. I think Catherine Keener is just tops, and she's in this film. This is another movie that's really kind of feel good. Just puts a smile on your face. There's a sequence where they're walking around New York City and they have headphones on, and you hear the music that's coming through their headphones that's played over the soundtrack, and you see the city kind of come alive to the music they're listening to. It's all about really just how great music is in their lives and how important music is in our lives. So Begin Again, great movie. Okay, this movie here is kind of a controversial pick because it's not really a musical. I think it is though, and I'm putting it on my list as one of my favorite musicals. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. It's a Western. And of course, Paul Newman, Robert Redford, legendary. Unfortunately, both of those actors are no longer with us. Directed by George Roy Hill, who's also not with us anymore. Catherine Ross, who luckily she's still with us. She plays the kind of like the woman that they share kind of in a way. I don't need to tell you much about it. It's about the Hole in the Wall gang, and they rob trains, and they have a goal to go to Bolivia. And the reason why I put it into the musical category is because the soundtrack by Burt Bacharach is just it's just, again, you put this movie on and you're just elated. It's a beautiful movie. I think it's breathtaking with the cinematography, and the performances are so great. And there's a sequence where they go to New York City to get on a ship, a freighter, because back then we didn't have the Panama Canal. They had to go all the way around. They boarded the ship in New York City, and there's a sequence where it's done basically as an old newsreel, and it's got this music by Burt Bacharach in the backdrop. So I put it in the musical category because of that. Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head, kind of a cornball song, but taken in the context of this movie, I think it kind of works. Also, the South American Getaway, which is a long instrumental that plays over when they go to South America to rob banks. Butch Cassidy, I'm sorry, it's a musical. Okay, Victor Victoria. I gotta move a little quicker because I don't want my battery to die. This is a Blake Edwards film. This is a Julie Andrews movie. Julie Andrews was in a couple of movies in the 80s, late 70s. 10 was a movie she was in with her husband, Blake Edwards. And then she was in Victor Victoria, which was later adapted into a Broadway show. If you watch this movie, you may think that it was a Broadway show first. It wasn't. It was a movie first. And of course, it's got James Gardner and Robert Preston in it. It's about Julie Andrews plays a down on her luck singer in Paris, Depression era Paris, and she basically gets together with Robert Preston, who plays a manager, and she becomes a woman pretending to be a man, pretending to be a woman, and it sounds really crazy. It's got some great music in it. Show-stopping numbers. I think it was nominated for a few Oscars for the musical score. James Garner is just incredible in this movie as this gangster who gets very confused when he falls for this entertainer who is supposed to be a man, but he's really a woman. You got to see it. If you've never seen Victor Victoria, it's funny, it's romantic, it's got great music, and it's just beautifully filmed. I think it's Blake Edwards. I think it's his best movie, frankly. Okay, what do you call Saturday Night Fever a musical? Is this movie a musical? Well, Flashdance is a musical, Footloose is a musical, Grease is a musical. Why not Saturday Night Fever? Of course, Grease is a very obvious musical. I did not put Grease on this list. I had to pick between Grease and Saturday Night Fever, and I picked Saturday Night Fever mainly because I like the music more. It's the Bee Gees, of course, but it's also got some other really interesting disco, a lot of disco songs that have a salsa beat to them. And of course, it's about a guy who works at a paint store, and he blows all of his money that he makes every week at the paint store at the dance club every Saturday night. Saturday night, not Friday night. Saturday night, and he enters a dance competition with this woman who's a little older than him. She's a secretary who takes the subway over to New York City every day, to Manhattan, but she's really a Brooklyn girl. She's got this she's very strikingly beautiful, but she's got this Brooklyn accent. She's played by Karen Lynn Gorney, who I haven't really seen in any other movies. Maybe she's made other movies, but she's great in this. Of course, Travolta, his dancing is just through the roof. I think he's an actor who can dance. He also can sing. He doesn't sing in this movie, but we know he can sing as well. And of course, the sequences where he's dancing are just they haven't aged. It's not a disco movie. I would not call this a disco movie. It's kind of a gritty movie. It's got a couple of scenes that are not really for children, even though they put out a PG version. This movie was actually cut and re-released to the theaters with a PG rating around the time Grease was out, so kids could see this movie. But the original Saturday Night Fever, which is this version, is the R version, which is gritty, and that's the version you should see. Saturday Night Fever. Okay, we've got just a few more left. I'm going to go pretty quickly if I can. Mamma Mia, I'm not going to talk much about this. This is a double feature Blu-ray. This is Mamma Mia, the first movie, and the sequel, Here I Go Again. I actually like the sequel a little more. I think it's got more substance to it. It's more touching. It talks about how Meryl Streep's character became the innkeeper, the owner of the inn in Greece, and for some reason, I just thought the second movie had a better story. Not to say that the first movie was more like the play. Pretty, she doesn't know who her dad is. It's one of these three guys. It could be Stellan Skarsgård. It could be Colin Firth, or it could be Pierce Brosnan. Which one is it? Of course, all of those actors. Pierce Brosnan, he has actually a very good singing voice. They're singing ABBA songs. They're dancing to ABBA songs. Who doesn't like ABBA? I mean, whether you can either call them a really great group that you really enjoy, or you can call them a guilty pleasure, whatever you may call them. If you don't like ABBA, at least one song by ABBA, there must be no joy in your life, because their music is so infectious, I think. So anyway, Mamma Mia is both movies. I'm cheating. I picked both of them mainly because it's a double feature Blu-ray. Now we're on to the Beatles. We've gone from ABBA to the Beatles. This is Across the Universe, and this was the another. I think this was on Broadway before. Maybe I could be mistaken. It's directed by Julie Taymor, not Juliet. Julie Taymor, who also adapted The Lion King, the movie The Lion King. She adapted that for Broadway, and she directed this. And this is basically, it takes the Beatles songs from all eras of the Beatles. From the early Beatles songs all the way up to the Let It Be and Abbey Road era. It takes a lot of the Beatles songs and puts it into a story about this English bloke who goes to New York City to become an artist. And he falls in with this guy who is a cab driver, and they live a life that you would see more likely probably in San Francisco during the time, but it happens to be New York City. I don't want to really reveal too much about it, because you really have to just go on this journey. And of course, they do it all with these Beatles songs, and they're great. The actors actually sing the Beatles songs very, very well. It's got some surprise cameo appearances by quite a few well-known musicians and actors, including Bono from U2. Across the Universe, especially if you like the Beatles, you cannot not like Across the Universe. I mean, people who are real purists of the Beatles, who really just feel the Beatles are just a great musical band, they may not like this movie because they might find it too flowery or whatever. I think it's beautifully directed. It uses songs by the Beatles in a very unique way, especially I Want You, She's So Heavy. Watch this movie and you know what I mean. I mean, they take the lyrics to their songs and they incorporate the lyrics into the story. The story is a little bit far out, but it's a trip across the universe. Okay, we've got 3 more left. I'm going to speed it up. Hair. This was based on an off-Broadway. It started off as an off-Broadway show in the late 60s, and then it became a Broadway show when it became really big. And of course, everybody knows the songs from Hair. You've got Let the Sun Shine In and Aquarius, and you've got Easy to Be Hard and Good Morning Starshine, and the song Hair itself. And a lot of the songs, as recorded by other artists from the late 60s, became hits, like Hair by the Cowsills, and Aquarius and Let the Sun Shine In by the Fifth Dimension. They were all big hits back in the 60s. So this is the movie they made of the musical in the 70s. This movie came out in 1979. Like New York, New York, which came out in 77, the late 70s were not a time for musicals. The late 70s were really the blockbuster era. You had Star Wars and Close Encounters and Superman, and you had these blockbuster movies, and you had kind of grittier adult, themed movies like Alien. Musicals didn't really come into play here. Now you did have All That Jazz, and I almost put All That Jazz on this list, but I wanted to feature another movie by Bob Fosse, so I didn't put All That Jazz. All That Jazz came out in 1979, and that was a pretty good hit. It wasn't a blockbuster, but it did pretty well at the box office, and it was a huge Oscar favorite. Hair was not. Hair was not an Oscar favorite, and Hair was not a huge hit. The last 15 minutes of this movie, you will be in awe by the music and the drama and the emotional journey that you go through during the last couple of moments of this film. I won't spoil it for you. Treat Williams is in this, like John Travolta. Treat Williams can sing, he can dance, he can act. Treat Williams is unfortunately no longer with us, but he does such a great job. There's a scene where they crash an upper crust party, and they're dancing on a dining room table, and he uses the chandelier to I can't describe it. It's another movie that it doesn't have a very uplifting climax, but to get there is just it's the choreography is just I can't even speak about it. I mean, that's how good this movie is. I mean, I picked it as number 3, but I could have easily made it number 2 or number 1. But we're gonna pick 2 other movies for 2 and 1, and they're again quite opposite each other. Cabaret. This is the Bob Fosse film that I chose instead of All That Jazz. This is another Liza Minnelli film. She plays the headliner at this Berlin club during the Weimar Republic. It's called the Kit Kat Club, and Nazism is starting to kind of come into play there. There's an undercurrent of Nazism growing, although this is the 1930s, so the clubs are still the rage. People are going to the club to see the MC, played by Joel Grey, I think he got an Oscar for this movie, and I think Liza Minnelli got an Oscar too. Cabaret would have swept the Oscars that year had it not been for a movie called The Godfather, which was the big movie of '72. This was a movie that got just as many Academy Award nominations, and I think actually ended up getting more Academy Awards than The Godfather did, mainly for the acting and the music. And the music, of course, Cabaret. The song Cabaret is in this. Tomorrow Belongs to Me. Watch that scene. You can actually watch that scene on YouTube. Just type in Cabaret, Tomorrow Belongs to Me. You can watch that one scene, and that kind of sums up the theme of the movie. And it's kind of frightening when you watch it now, because there's some similarities to what's going on in the United States, summed up by that scene. So this movie, Cabaret, there are other great songs in this as well, of course. The song that we all know, though, of course, is Cabaret. Tomorrow Belongs to Me, Mein Herr. Those are all just money. Money makes the world go round. You can see the influence this movie had on Chicago. In fact, the writer of Cabaret, the Broadway musical, also wrote Chicago. Chicago is really, the movie Chicago was a tribute to Bob Fosse. And Cabaret definitely paved the way for Chicago, as well as Moulin Rouge and a lot of other musicals from the 2000s. Okay, the last movie, just in time, because I think my battery is getting ready to go out. I have to put The Blues Brothers as number 1, mainly because I've been watching this movie now since I was a kid. When we first got our VCR back in the early 80s, this is one of the first movies we rented. Back then it was 2 video cassettes. It was such a long movie that it couldn't fit in one, so it was in this big double pack. I still remember it to this day, a double pack VHS. And this is The Blues Brothers, and actually 2 versions of this. There's the original theatrical version of The Blues Brothers, and then there was an extended version that has a couple of scenes that they clipped out of the movie. And you can see why they clipped them out of the movie, because they don't really add much to the movie. They just made the movie longer. But if you're really familiar with The Blues Brothers and you want to see something a little different, watch the extended cut, which is on this Blu-ray, as well as the original version. It's definitely a musical. In fact, it was promoted. The movie poster basically said, The Blues Brothers, a musical comedy. And that's exactly what it is. It's a musical and a comedy, but it's also got a lot of action and stunts. The stunt work in this, unbelievable. This movie came out a couple of years after Smokey and the Bandit. So, movies with a lot of crazy stunts with cars were big back in the late 70s, and this movie came out in 1980. And the other thing about this movie that's really interesting is I found out not too long ago that this was the first movie shot in Chicago in probably about 7 or 8 years. They hadn't made a lot of movies in Chicago for whatever reason. I think the political system in Chicago wasn't very welcoming to movies, so they didn't make a lot of movies in Chicago. And the Blues Brothers changed that. And boy, did it ever, because Chicago is definitely featured in this movie quite prominently. And all the stuff that happens at the end of the movie in Chicago, if you've seen the movie, you know what I mean. They really, Chicago really, they were a good sport. That whole city was a great sport for the filmmakers for this movie. And of course, since the Blues Brothers, there have been many movies made in Chicago. So when I read that, I was really surprised. But it's interesting. But you can't go wrong. Jake and Elwood, the music, both of them have good voices. John Belushi, I think, has a slightly better singing voice. Dan Aykroyd has got kind of more of a talker when he sings, but he's great for sure. All of the songs they do together, of course, the climax when they're when they're at the ballroom and all that, great stuff. Great musicianship. The band, the Blues Brothers, they are just all world-class musicians. I think a lot of them, unfortunately, have passed away, but great musical. Can't miss it. If you've never seen the Blues Brothers, what are you waiting for? Anyway, the Blues Brothers is number 1. Cabaret, number 2. Hair is number 3. Across the Universe, number 4. By the way, some of these are Blu-rays, some of them are some of them are DVDs. Mamma Mia, this is a Blu-ray double set of the first and second movie. Saturday Night Fever, this is a Blu-ray. Victor Victoria, this is a DVD. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, yes, I consider that to be a musical. Begin Again, Blu-ray. Godspell, this is a DVD. There's another musical on here called Lost Horizon, which I have not seen. It came out around the same time as Godspell. It's a musical remake of a Frank Capra film. I have not watched it yet. I got this movie because I wanted Godspell. Rock and Roll High School. Rocket Man, this is my favorite biopic on the list. New York, New York, directed by Martin Scorsese. South Park. And we're going to end with the granddaddy and grandmama of all musicals, in my opinion at least, Singing in the Rain, which is a perfect movie to watch today because it's rainy and cold out after being 80 degrees yesterday. It's now rainy and cold. So maybe it's a good day for Singing in the Rain. Who knows? Okay, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.